Well, hello, it's been a while. I've been not playing Magic actually for quite some time. I needed a break and then I got quite busy. I did have a. I had started one game. I had won one game and then I haven't played in 2 weeks. So I came back to this version of the deck. I'm going to scroll down so you can see the rest. After Underground Sea, the usual suspects in terms of lands. I am kind of waiting for there's a new commander land. It does come into play tapped, which is a little bit weak, but whenever you play, you name it. I think it's a creature type. You can scry. So obviously in this deck you'd name human. I'm not sure if that land will be playable or not. I want to look at it again, but it seems like it might be. At any rate, so this is the deck here that I played with. I have made a few changes, so I'll hit those after the games. And meanwhile, we'll go ahead and run through, and then I'll talk a little bit about where I see what I see changing, because there's a rule change that was brought to my attention that is going to be interesting, I think, and make our deck stronger. All right, so this was a game against Fluffy. Yeah, this is sad. I haven't played so long. I think I was like second last time, and well, decidedly not second. Anyway, all right. So my first round, I don't remember anything about it. Okay, Fluffy Pingo playing Breya, a keepable hand, but not a very exciting one. I think I mulligan that hand away because the problem with that hand is you don't. It's not. I didn't really have. Yes, I could force a will with it, but you don't really want to have to cast force a will. And that hand was definitely going to have to cast force a will because it had nothing going except the winter orb and a winter orb against um, Breya in the mirror. That's not really a good plan. This hand I kept on the other hand because it has the potential for some card advantage. And my opponent goes turn 2 Talisman. In response to that, I'll Tithe. I don't want it to come into play, and then he has mana so he can cast like some sort of Force Spike. So grab a couple of islands. I'm not. Is this game gonna bug out? I find this highly unlikely. Why would I have? Why would I have played the Hollowed Fountain here? Is this really gonna bug? And are we bugging out in round one? This is extremely disappointing if so. Well, I'm gonna try to run it. Yeah, illegal target, no target chosen. Okay. Well, I do apologize, but all I can tell you is I beat Fluffy Pingo. I don't know what to do about that other than move on to round two. So sorry for that. That was probably actually the most interesting game in the set, too. Frustrating. But I did want to make a video, and I don't have a ton of. Like I said, I don't have hardly any games to do that with. So anyway, these are the games I played today. So I get a first turn Serum Visions. I'm playing against Yamaka Killer with Nissa, and I play Serum Visions and put the two cards on top. I really don't like Serum Visions very much, and I think it was after this game I decided I was going to just pull it. But anyway, my opponent's off to a really good start. I do have some disruption in my hand, but I want to get Breya down so that I can start pressuring his commander. I assume his commander's coming down now and may even flip. Instead, he Reap and Sows one of my lands and fetches a temple. So he is up a tremendous amount of mana compared to my board position. My opponent's got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana to my 3. I played Crucible to get 4, but that's it. Opponent then plays Cultivate and gets 2 more lands and a Woodland Bellower. I figured he was going to destroy my Crucible here, but instead he gets Fierce Empath so that he can prime time into even more lands. So luckily, Crucible is ensuring that I'm going to hit land drops, and with a Crucible and a Talisman in it, okay board position, I go ahead and muddle for Orb and get the Orb down. Opponent flips his Nissa, but he is not able to play his Primeval Titan, which is very nice, excuse me. So now I'm replaying lands from the graveyard and paying attention to how many I actually have so that I don't overdo it. I go ahead and just send in one guy at Nissa here in order to try to protect Doretti from taking a hit. My opponent generates enough mana to actually cast Primeval Titan and passes, fetching even more mana sources. So at this point, my opponent has effectively gone infinite. If you can get rid of the Winter Orb, then he's got it. So this turn I actually cast As Foretold and sacrifice my Talisman so that I can attack for 5 and kill his commander. But it means that he's going to get to kill my Doretti. So he kills my Doretti and then lignifies Breya before I can Spell Snare because I didn't have one counter on As Foretold, unfortunately. This turn he gets to play a Kadama's Reach. But my opponent is critically down to only 2 cards in hand. So even though I have a commander that can't do much, I have a fairly strong board position and many ways that I can free Breya from under the Lignify. One of them I just impulsed into off of As Foretold, so it was free. Go ahead and just chip away with incidental damage from my Thopters. When it plays his Nissa, I'm not going to bother countering or dealing with that since I can kill it next turn. He manages to find himself a Bird of Paradise. I think he revealed, what else did he reveal here? Nothing too important. Anyway, on my turn, I go ahead and, As Foretold, cast a Sword of Feast and Famine for free, equip Breya, then equip my Thopter, and smash hitting. I thought he would chump block with his bird, but he doesn't. So I hit my opponent with the Thopter so I could untap all my lands, and then I hit his commander with Breya. He did not chump, so his commander dies. I untap all my lands, and that allows me to cast a combination of Toxic Deluge for 1, keeping both my creatures alive since Thopter's wearing the sword, a Jace, and next turn and then a Demonic Tutor. And next turn I go ahead and fetch a Ancestral Vision under the assumption that my opponent really isn't going to do much with 1 mana. He may untap a land and then play a second land and make a play, but I have Spell Snare for that off As Foretold. And so I'm planning to go ahead and just Ancestral next turn. Between Ancestral and Jace, I fully expect the drawing. I'm going to be drawing 7 cards next turn and putting 2 back, so I'm fully expecting to find myself a counterspell that'll lock the game down, but my opponent scoops to Winter Orb, so we'll move on to the next game there. And I mean, as frustrating as Winter Orb may be, like the fact that my opponent had, 9 mana to my 3 is exactly why I hope that they do not ever ban the card, because I mean, yes, you can just replace it, but in right there, the fact that it was 2 mana was pretty critical. I can always replace it with like Rising Waters and other type of effects, but I think that the card's too important for a fairly out of control decks that are nerfed by it. Okay, here's Baral, my opponent, and if you think about it, my opponent in that game was playing green, and should have had answers for artifacts. He played 0. I never had to deal with any of them at all. So, all right. So my opponent's got an early Baral, and I don't really have a great hand here. I go for Signet, but inexplicably it resolves. Not sure what he was saving his counter for, but I think me getting ahead in mana is not good for him. If he were to get an Emrakul here, I could actually, Toxic Deluge the Emrakul for 15 life, but it would certainly be a worthwhile exchange. Fortunately, it doesn't happen. I'm just kind of setting up. I'm not really sure. Like, my hand isn't doing much. The Cryptic helps a little bit, but hoping to draw a little bit more interaction with the stack, and I do. I find a counterspell is very, very nice. Here, obviously, my opponent Mystical Tutors for Force of Will. Unfortunate to see that. I think he may have gone for the right card there, although it does put him down quite a few cards. So at the end of his turn, I try to Cryptic Command in Island. He memory lapses it, and because it's a Cryptic Command, I go ahead and allow that to happen since I'm quite happy drawing a Cryptic again. He pitches he deserts a Desertion to the play. And then on the next turn, I try a Commander, and my opponent Arcane Denials it. Now, Arcane Denial, my Commander, is basically like playing a card that says, blue 1, your opponent draws 2 cards, you draw 1. I didn't even lose a card in this trade-off, so... On my opponent's turn, he goes for Sword of Feast and Famine. I have to counter it only because I need to fight. I need to make sure he can't equip it this turn. I actually wanted my counter to get countered, and I was fortunate in that it did. It allows me to then Vandal Blast Sword on my turn. Opponent tries to Force the Will there, and I Cryptic. So if you've been keeping track, I'm going to go ahead and pause it right here. So my opponent only has 2 cards in hand to my 6, and there's a reason for that. And the reasons are, First of all, he mystical tutored, so he's down a card. Secondly, he played Arcane Denial on my commander, which put him down 2 cards technically in terms of his count versus my count, because Arcane Denial replaced itself, but it might as well just been blue 1, target opponent draws 2 cards. His commander costs 2 more mana. I mean, that's exactly what it did, right? So he was down 1 card plus 2 more, so that's 3 cards he's down. And then my opponent Force of Willed at one point, which put him down 4 cards, and I successfully resolved a cryptic command on the Force of Will, which put him down 5 cards. So if you think about it, he's got 4 in play, not counting his commander, since we're not really counting that in the card count. I've got 7 plus 6 in hand, so 13 cards total. He's got 4 plus 3 is 7 cards total. So he's got 7 to my 13, and this is why my opponent's losing pretty hard right now. So let's go ahead and just continue this game. And so anyway, he tries a Flash of Insight, which does make up for one of the cards he lost, but he's just so behind. So he gets to hit me with a Mishra's and Baral. I have taken a decent amount of damage. I do attempt a Demonic Tutor here. My opponent tries to counterspell it. And I was thinking about, how do I want to address this, or do I even want to address it? And I decide that I don't. So what I do is, in response, I whir for 2, going for the orb. And then my opponent does get the counterspell. And the reason I did it in that order, look at my opponent discarded a free counterspell, Mental Misstep. Now, I wouldn't have stopped whir, but he could have very well drawn into a daze, so that was why I did it like that. So I try on my turn, on his turn he untaps the land, on my turn I untap 3 mana and I attempt to Deluge for 3. It gets delayed, so my opponent is down yet another card because delay doesn't actually counter anything, it just stalls. So in a couple of turns he's going to have to blow another counter on that. I get to play land tax, pick up a basic island and pass, thanks to Azorius Signet on the next, or Chancery on the next turn. And my opponent plays into the tax, so he's now going to drop even more cards behind in this war of attrition here. I am taking a lot of damage, and I'm going to take even more when I cast the Deluge, but it's all worth it, so I go ahead and cast it for 3. Opponent tries to rewind. If it was another counter, I might have thought about it, since there's other ways I could have dealt with Baral, but a rewind under a Winter Orb is not acceptable. So I go ahead and counter his rewind. He has no solution to that. I Mystical Teachings, play a land and pass. I go get Daze. Opponent's going to attack me with Mishra's Factory. He's basically destroying 2 lands to deal 2 damage to me. I make a misplay here and untap Steam Bends because I was planning ahead a little bit further than I was actually should have. Fortunately, it doesn't matter too much as I'm able to play Dak Faden, and I'll get the Chancery soon enough. I throw away a couple of lands to him. Opponent keeps on hitting me. I Dak, well, now I find myself a Crucible, and then I Dak, keeping a Mox Diamond that I tutored for. And the reason I did, so this does put me down a few cards, but Crucible negates, it undoes any disadvantage from Mox Diamond. But I wasn't actually planning to play the Diamond right away. What I'm hoping to do is I'm filling my graveyard with cards that make the Yawgmoth's Will in my hand even more powerful. Meanwhile, I got an As for Told out, which makes this quite difficult to beat me. I'm Dak away. I keep Dacking away lands and then replaying them from the graveyard. I go ahead and fetch a Mana Leak here because Mana Leak is as good as a counterspell, and since I can play it off of a Signet, it's actually better in some cases. When it tries a Chrome Mox, I'm certainly going to let him not only go down a card, but give me a card to steal with Dak Faden. At the end of my opponent's turn, I go ahead and sack Winter Orb, steal his Chrome Mox, play Sword of Feast and Famine, equip it, cast a, well, my opponent just gives up. So what was going to happen here is he's going to go ahead and just cast Doretti, then cast a Yawgmoth's Will, and then attack and untap all of my lands under Yawgmoth's Will, and then we were really going to get this party started. But my opponent has had enough at this point. He's at 29, I'm at 10, but none of that matters. So, yeah, I was going to, I'm not even sure exactly what I would have done with the Will. I didn't actually ever find a land for the Mox Diamond that I threw away earlier. I kept hoping that I was going to have an opportunity to daze a land back into my hand and then pitch it to Mox Diamond. But I think given all that was about to happen, that's perfectly fine. And I may have very well been drawing cards. I might have, for example, cast Fact or Fiction to get more cards in my hand, potentially, or I may have just not been greedy and, just gone totally ape with my graveyard, and that would have been fine as well. So Hayden loses, and I get to play Lewandowski in round 4. This is nice because these are pretty much, actually these are entirely the only games I played today. It's the first I've played in weeks, and it's always nice to come back to a winning situation. So I go ahead and keep a little bit of a slow hand, especially against Thrasios and Tymna. I don't have much to interact with them early. I'm not willing to pay life to potentially Spell Piercer because I had a pretty good read. He was going to... Thrasios and a Tymna is too tempting when you're going first. And I draw the best top deck ever, Lightning Bolt, which means I get to play Winter Orb here, and that is pretty much the game at this point. My opponent's struggling under Orb and missing drops, while I'm working through the Orb thanks to the power of Dimer Signet. So I go and search for a War of Invention to make it even easier to work through the Orb. My Ancestral Vision that I floated in turn 1, which is always another really powerful play, resolves, and of course it digs me into a land and a Jeweled Amulet and a Talisman, which is pretty good when you're holding Whir. Alright, so my opponent bashes in, and I'm in no hurry to Whir, and given that my opponent tried to make a play that I needed to counter, I'm definitely not going to do that. So go ahead and just fetch and pass. I'm just going to smash in with the Thrasios. This is all fine by me. So what I want to do at the end of his turn is Whir here, and I also want to charge a Jeweled Amulet, since this is going to be the one turn where I get all my mana back. So I go ahead and Whir. After the Whir, I charge the Amulet. I don't charge before because I don't want to get hit with some sort of Daze effect. And the card I fetched was Vedalken Shackles. So now I have Thrasios working for me. And between Shackles and Orb, an artifact-based victory is imminent. I drew by Force, one of the major ways to prevent your opponent from getting an artifact-based victory. Go ahead and just kill his Fëanor Elf right away and hit him for a point of damage. And at this point, my opponent just gives up. So this is a very nice way to, my opponent has a really aggressive commander pair between Thrasios and Tymna, but due to him stumbling a little bit on land and then having me top decking the absolute best Lightning Bolt ever, it works out quite nicely. So finally, in round 5, I end up paired against Aiden again, and okay with that, although I do really dislike Baral. I honestly think Baral is really unhealthy for the format. Seems like one of the commanders that I don't know anybody that enjoys playing against it. Even though this deck does very well, I don't enjoy playing against it. It's not fun at all. Anyway, my opponent had to mulligan, but he mulligans into Ancient Tomb Proteus Staff Draw, and I actually dare him to find something like City of Traders to take advantage of it. So he plays Baral and Umezawa's Jete, and that's it. And I am loving this board state. I drew a Mox Opal, which allows me to actually cast Coalition Relic here, and then run in a by Force. Hopefully not getting dazed. It didn't, but if it did, and my opponent were to fetch Emrakul, then I would just ready Emrakul off the board. So my opponent on his turn, he Factor Fictions, and I end up taking some time to split this. As you can see, I'm flipping around. The trick here is he's got 2 lands, a Vedalken Shackles I don't care about thanks to Duretti, Reweave, which I don't care about thanks to Lightning Bolt, and Mystical Tutor, which I care a little bit about, but I don't mind terrible if he goes down in cards. On the other hand, Tutor is the best card in there overall, and I don't want to pair it with mana because the other good stuff for him to get is mana. So I end up splitting Mystical Tutor Reweave into one pile, and land creature and Vedalken Shackles in the other, thinking he'll overvalue the Shackles because, of course, he doesn't know how weak they are against me, and that's what happened. So on my turn, I go ahead and cast Breya, which already kind of does a pretty good job of invalidating Shackles. Then I sack Windswept Teeth and get a Tundra because I don't want him to make a play in response to me sacking Tundra. So he plays Shackles, but he doesn't even have enough basic lands. This was the other thing too. Steel Shackles, which is something I was paying attention to. So my turn, I go for a bolt off of the charge Coalition Relic charge. My opponent counters, which is interesting. So in response, I think I would have let that go for him and just replayed. But in response to his draw effect, I anguished on making his Shackles, which I drew for the turn. And at this point, I don't want to run out the ready because next turn I can play it with a counter. Plus, it's my one guarantee of not getting killed with Emrakul. So I go ahead and hit my opponent, and I figure at the end of his turn I can just sack 2 Thopters and attempt to kill his Baral, probably resolving, then charge a Coalition Relic, and I'd have Muddle backing me up on that kind of a play. So I think that would be the strongest play here for me. And with Breya on the table, it's very hard for my opponent to initiate his combo. And so he kind of realizes that and scoops it up. So that was it. I guess it was pretty smooth now. Finally back in the mix here. I managed to find some time to game. Jumped up to, what is that, 9 wins there. It's not too shabby. All right, so that was the previous deck, but I'll bring up the version I'm running now, and then I'll talk about kind of what I anticipate for the future. So the version I'm running now is a little bit different. It actually has Fire Ice in it. I took out the Sword of Fire and Ice, and I just put Fire Ice in it. I really like having, like, I love drawing Whirlwind Winter Orbs in play because it lets you get that one really good turn where you get to untap all your lands. And Fire Ice can function the same way because you can ice the orb at the end of your opponent's turn. I really like that. Also, I noticed that with Breya, I spent a lot of time, like I killed a Llanowar elf. I would much prefer to, fire a Llanowar elf rather than sack 2 creatures with Breya, possibly. But also, I like the fact that I can ice islands at the end of my opponent's turn to make it a little tough for them to win a counter war. What I don't like about Fire Ice is that 2 damage is not quite enough to kill Baral. However, a card I have added, I don't remember if I had this in there in the last game or not, but I've added a Braid to the deck. So this is even more artifact removal, and it's more creature removal. I think this card is amazing. When I saw this spoiled, it was the one card that I knew I wanted to get a hold of. And it was a little expensive, actually, surprisingly. I guess it's probably popular in Standard. But this card is fantastic. This card is so good in this format. Like, it's exactly what you want. If it hadn't been an instant, I had thought about playing it. I probably wouldn't have. But at instant speed, being able to destroy an artifact or a creature is fantastic. And because it does 3 damage, which means it can take out critical creatures like Selvala and Baral, for example, come to mind. But it also destroys an artifact, so it can take out Breya at instant speed. So it's just a really, really nice card. I mean, unfortunately, you can't go face with it, so you're not going to be killing any Jaces with it. But other than that, it's nice. I also have in this version, I added Trinket Mage and I added Skull Clamps. I put those 2 cards together. I think they do kind of go together if you're going to run them. But I wanted to have, so in those games against the blue player, I kept thinking, gosh, I want to draw Expedition map. Let me draw a map. Come on, where's my map? So I wanted to find a way to, have another way to draw Expedition map for those blue matches. And Trinket Mage is a potential way to do that because sometimes they won't counter the Trinket Mage, and it makes it very hard on them if they don't counter the Mage, because then Expedition map is a much harder card to win a counter war over, and it seems fairly innocuous. Sometimes you just let it go to your detriment because it turns into a Cavern of Souls. Also, if you're going first and you go, land, they go second land Baral, and you go third land Trinket Mage, you can go get the map right then. So if you're willing to risk, of course, them having a turn 3 polymorph, but again, you could go land, they could go Baral, and then you could abrade it, and then Trinket Mage. I mean, that's living the dream, but it'd be pretty nice, right? So there's more, you have a little bit more of that. And because I put Trinket Mage in here, and of course we do have a decent number of artifact targets, no Soul Ring and Mana Crypt, of course, but these will have to do. Skull Clamp, I wanted to have something like a Sensei's Divining Top. In other words, I wanted a 1-drop or less that actually gave me cards or card quality in some way. And in the current format, the best card for doing that, the closest thing we have to that guaranteed card selection of a Sensei's Divining Top is the less guaranteed but more powerful Skull Clamp. So that's why I made that switch. I also like the fact that Skull Clamp's very good with Duretti. I kind of missed having that interaction between Clamp and Duretti, so I went ahead and put that in there. And I also like the interaction between Clamp and Shackles, where you can Shackles their Lana Royale, for example, and then clamp it and carry on. So, and of course, Clamp and Breya. All right, so now that I've talked about all that, what's the change that I anticipate? Well, there's a rule change happening. If you haven't seen it, I got it messaged to me by one of the viewers of the channel, and thank you, Johnny, for sending me that message through Facebook. But the rule change that's happening is that Planeswalkers, you can now play Planeswalkers. They're going to become uh, legendary permanents. Rather than being Planeswalker Jace, uh, it'll be legendary Jace Planeswalker. And what that means is something along those lines. And so what that means though is that bottom line is that two Planeswalkers with different names will be just like legends in the way that you can play multiple legends with different names but have the same creature type. So for example, you can play Thalia the 3-drop and you can play Thalia the 2-drop, and both of them live because they're two different Thalias. They have different names even though they're legendary Thalia creatures. Well, Planeswalkers are going to work the same way. And what that means is that we can actually run as many Jaces as we want without real any kind of ramification. We can run, as many Tezzerets as we want, for example, with no, you're not going to get those clunky hands where you're staring at, two or three copies of the same Planeswalker type. Somebody plays Pithing Needle and then you just sit there like, well, I guess you could follow up and start exchanging them out. But I mean, the bottom line is I don't like the way it feels when I'm sitting here holding a Jace and looking at another Jace. And it's one of the reasons that I've avoided playing two Jaces or more. But now that we can, I think the human Jace, who is already really, really good being a human and a 2-drop and giving us recursion, and the fact that it's a very defensive card, it's just a very good card, I think makes the cut in here. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, and that's what I'm slowly building up tickets for, because I've spent way too many tickets lately, or at least not lately, but back before I took my break. So a lot of talking in this end of video scene here, so hopefully I didn't bore you too much, but those are my thoughts. Since I've been gone for a while, I thought I would share them with you. And I do recommend, if you are playing this deck, that you go ahead and just pick yourself up Baby Jace, because I'm pretty confident that that's going to be a staple, as much of a staple as this Jace is. That one will be as well. The other card that's up for debate might be the 4-drop Tezzeret that draws cards and turns artifacts into 5/5 beaters. It's possible that that card could be pretty good in here, but I'm not sure that pretty good is good enough, because it doesn't actually deal with anything on the board other than Planeswalkers if they have no blockers and you've got an artifact. It's kind of a stretch. So as of right now, I'm not leaning towards that card. But, Baby Jace is totally crazy. And it also, conveniently, not just as a human, but it rewards you for, you can run more of these cards like Vandal Blast, Byforce, cards which might be dead in some cases, because you'll be able to pitch them to the flip ability, or at least to the looter ability early on, potentially. So when that card comes, the cards that I think are up for consideration as far as taking in, taking out, and so on and so forth, I think Trinket could potentially come back out if we don't need him. Same with Skull Clamp. I'm not sure though, because having the extra human makes Expedition Map a lot better, and maybe they do stay. Certainly Byforce and or Vandal Blast, one of the cards could go. I also think Fire Ice is certainly up for debate, but Fire Ice does get a lot better when you have the ability to recur it. So we'll see. And I think, yeah, so I think it looks something like, these are all the cards that you can kind of play around with as far as flex slots goes. And I don't really see any more Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Most of the rest of these cards, I don't think I would mess with. And I'm really happy with a Braid. Man, I'm happy with that card. So anyway, those are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flexible slots. But if you do take out Bioforce or Vandalblast, I suggest that you leave one of them in. So that's kind of your call. And that's all I've got. Hopefully, I'll have some more gameplay for you coming up. Hopefully, I'll have some more interesting gameplay for you. That was not maybe the best, but I will definitely try to get a few more videos out without too much delay. Thanks very much for watching. That's all I've got now, and I'll see you next time.